to the Cougar Tailgate, where BYU fandom lives. Here's your hosts, Sydney Carlson and Cole Wissinger.
Welcome into the Cougar Tailgate. It is that time every single week where we look with the BYU fans at what has been going on in the world of BYU sports. I'm Cole Wissinger alongside Sydney Carlson as always. Hello.
Hello,
How
Cole.
was, Christmas and New Year in the past 3 weeks since we've been hanging out on the air?
Has it been 3 weeks? Oh my
I
gosh.
think so. As I was looking at all the games that we missed, I'm pretty sure
There's been 3 of them. Wow. It was good. It was a lot of hanging out. Was a little sick again, but we're here. We're powering through, and we are ready for some basketball.
Yeah, BYU Basketball is pushing onward as well. Football has wrapped up their season. We might, if we have to, mention that at some point during today, but we're going to start by focusing on some basketball.
Pause. BYU in front court. 10 seconds to play. Crossover by TJ. Drives past Kuzi for the dunk and the tie. 77-77. 6.6. Ford with 5 and with 4 and with 3. Ford floater. Missed it. We are going to overtime!
To overtime they went, and it didn't turn out quite so great. St. Mary's has a little bit of overtime experience, I think. But what we're going to do is we kind of catch up on BYU sports is go backwards, because that St. Mary's game a couple nights ago was pretty dang fun.
It was fun. It's a heartbreaker for sure, and I feel like BYU fans have had their share of that recently. But I love a game where they fight to the end, And I feel like TJ got another golden shining moment, which was so fun.
Did he?
And he's really come in clutch a couple times this season, and it's always fun to see guys show up like that.
And he is dunking this season.
Who
In case you
knew?
didn't realize
Who knew?
that he could dunk, he's doing it. And as we've mentioned on this pretty much every single time on this program, as TJ goes, the team kind of goes. And for so much of this game, we were just hanging 4 points back, 6 points back, then back to 4, and then, it's 2, but then, there's a chance to tie, and then we're back down to 2 and 4. And it wasn't until TJ got hot very, very late in regulation that we finally got it to a tie game, sent it to overtime, and we really, really did need something spectacular in overtime, and we didn't quite get it. But to get to overtime against this St. Mary's team is an accomplishment.
Right. And it took TJ to get there, as we've said. And it's just it's weird to have that kind of barometer of one guy to kind of make or break a game, but he's really important to this team, and we're really lucky to have him.
It's a heat check for the entire team. Now, TJ was so important in this one because Yoeli was not there for this particular game. Injured. He had a big honking cast on his pointer finger there on his shooting hand, and it is a dislocated... there's a fancy word for it. Anyway, one of the other guys I work with here knows what kind of a dislocation it was, and he showed me pictures of his brother who had the same dislocation.
Ooh.
It is a nasty looking injury, and the fact that they said 1 to 2 weeks, maybe back for Gonzaga, if it's anything like this picture of some other guy that had a similar injury, I would be shocked if he is shooting a basketball in 2 weeks, because it is a...
You don't need your hands for basketball. What are you talking about?
Yeah, especially the pointer. I'm pretty sure when you learn how to shoot a basketball, that's what you follow through on, right? It's let the fingers...
Let it roll off roll off your
something
finger.
like that.
Pointer finger.
I've played some pickup.
Some hoop in your days?
Out in the backyard. All 5'7" of me can throw up something once in a while.
I played City League for a hot second, and girls are mean. Girls are mean, and they are aggressive, and they use fingernails. And I was like, you know what? This is not for me. I'm going to play softball where you're not interacting as much.
Actually, the last thing to come off the ball when you're shooting it is the fingernail.
Yes, the finger. Exactly.
City League ball, Sydney Carlson. That's great. So overtime against St. Mary's, they're a top, that's a team that should be ranked. They had a weird loss in there, and they had a 4 overtime game. I mentioned they're practiced in overtime. They have played a long season this very short way into the season, it seems like.
They have. Well, and they were Utah State's first loss for a while before, when they were on their really hot streak, that they were ranked. St. Mary's was that big L on their schedule for a while. So they've consistently been really successful against good teams, and they're always a team that we battle against. It seems like They more so even than Gonzaga always have our number too. So to be able to hang with them for so much of that game and to push it to overtime in a year when they're really good is definitely something to, I think, be optimistic about.
Mm-hmm. I didn't play a lot of basketball, but I did play a little hockey. And in hockey, in the NHL, you have a wins column, a losses column, and then an overtime loss column, which also counts as points as you go towards the postseason. And when the Stanley Cup playoffs open up, you get 2 points for a win and 1 point for an overtime loss, because that's kind of how hockey's like a game of inches, and it's so close. So close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and actually the NHL. BYU so far this year has 3 overtime losses to really stinking good teams.
Oh, gosh.
And
it is the year of the overtime games. I tell you what. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it.
And the cool thing is that really at this point in the schedule, we like to see wins. But really your resume boosting, right? You just want to be on the bracket bubble radar, right?
Yeah.
And an overtime loss to Utah or an overtime loss to St. Mary's really does kind of count like half of a win as far as those bracketologist people are concerned. This is an okay thing to put on your resume. If we'd gotten blown out, right, the line was 6, and honestly, without Yoeli, that line could have been minus even more for St. Mary's. But to keep it 2 overtime and to keep it that close, I think it counts. It counts where it counts.
Sure. And I mean, it seems like in recent years, especially, BYU's best bet at postseason play has been being just you have to be successful in the tournament and in the WCC tournament. And I think seeing that we are able to compete with those teams now maybe is a good look for us as we look ahead to March. If you can stay competitive in the conference and then know that you can compete with those guys and you're just as athletic and just as good as a St. Mary's team, that that's a bit of a confidence booster when you go in and you play in Vegas.
And then when you plug in Yoeli the next time that we play St. Mary's,
right,
and it's at home the next time we play St. Mary's, it's going to be a different kind of a game.
Skip from right corner to left corner, big 3, and AB missed it. Put back is good by Childs, and a foul. A chance for a 3-point play.
Because Yoeli was having a heck of a season in between these two, not playing because of suspension and now not playing because of injury. There were some other basketball games that were played. There was BYU over LMU as we kind of go backwards in the schedule.
Yeah, we were chatting about this game just briefly before we started recording.
Just because the score looks
what a weird
so
game.
Weird.
The score, I mean, the final score is 63-38, but I was sitting watching this game in the first half. The end of halftime, it was 24-19, and we were in single digits for the first 10 minutes of that game. It was brick after brick, and I was just curious as to where that game was going to head. Luckily, the second half, BYU kind of hit their stride and was able to really, truly put it away in a grand fashion. But man, what a weird game. It felt like everyone was so cold to start.
And then we go back in the schedule. So that was WCC play. Our last couple games before we launched into WCC was Oral Roberts, BYU 79-73 there, and BYU a 30-point win over Weber State to kind of close out our little in-state tournament that we ended up playing a bunch of teams in here. 91-61 over Weber State.
Yeah, we ended up being 3-1 against in-state opponents. Not too shabby.
Yeah, and that one, could have gone different, and it was an overtime loss. So it's kind of
listen.
Like I said,
we end that game 5 minutes sooner, and we're undefeated in state.
And Yoeli plays a little bit longer, right? The guy. So there's a lot of conversation, right? And because you look at our losses, and Yoeli wasn't totally a factor in all of them. And Greg Wrubell tweeted out talking about when Yoeli puts up 29, you can't really count that he wasn't there for that game. Mm-hmm. But I contest that we can, because
that one.
We had the lead when he was in the game, and then things kind of started slowly, dramatically falling apart when he went out.
Yeah.
Had he been able to stay in that whole game, it's a different looking BYU team. There was a tale of the Yoeli and BYU, and there was the tale of the Sans Yoeli.
Well, at that point, you're another guy on the floor, and you're thinking, I don't really have to do a whole lot. Yoeli's got it in hand, and I think that the rhythm and kind of the dynamic of how that team was playing and being cohesive together just fell apart when Yoeli went out in that game, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably worth noting that Yo hasn't played in any of the 3 overtime losses. He was averaging just over 20 points a game and just over 10 rebounds a game. He's had 4 double-doubles since he's been back, as well as averaging 1. Basically, I'm saying the future looks bright for when he comes back.
We are pulling for you, Yoeli Childs.
It's a special team, and we're going to accomplish special things, and it's going to be really, really hard. And that's what sport is. And you ask, this is about getting better every day, and that's the character of this group of guys. That's why we tout this idea of becoming the best locker room in America, and that's what these guys will do. We'll have much happier nights tonight in terms of result, and I don't, but it doesn't matter result in terms of how proud we can all be of these guys, because these guys are putting their heart and soul on the floor.
When we come back, I will be speaking with Jason Brough of the Portland Athletics Department to give us a little bit of history on who the Portland Pilots are and what we can expect for tonight's basketball game, BYU Portland. This is the Cougar Tailgate. Welcome back into the Cougar Tailgate. I'm Cole Wissinger, and that is the Portland Victory March. The sound of the opposing team's fight song means we are about to learn more about the opponent BYU's going up against today, and that is Portland, and we are with Jason Brough, a Senior Associate Athletic Director for the University of Portland, a man that's been with the program quite some time and will act as our guide through the University of Portland through the years. Welcome into the Cougar Tailgate, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're talking the Portland Pilots today, but do you know how they got the nickname the Pilots? It's kind of unique in the NCAA.
Yeah, it's unique and it's misunderstood generally. Everyone thinks airline pilots, but the actual pilot is riverboat pilots. Our campus is located on a bluff overlooking the Willamette River, which flows right into the nearby Columbia River, which separates Washington and Oregon. So it's a major shipping channel to the Pacific Ocean, and riverboat pilots are very prevalent in the history of our region, and especially with the confluence of the Willamette River, which our campus overlooks, and the shipyards down below our campus, and the Columbia. Our history dates all the way back to the early 1900s of the former university named Columbia University, with reference to the Columbia River, and then
as opposed to Columbia University, right?
Yeah, Columbia, exactly. So then we transitioned to University of Portland sometime later, and there were all kinds of potential names: cliff dwellers for on the bluff, bluffers, Chinooks for the salmon species that's prevalent up here. But by presidential fiat at the time, they determined to go with riverboat pilots and shorten to pilots in general.
Bluffers would have been my pick. That one sounds fun. No, pilots. So it makes sense because the little logo that you got looks like a pirate wheel, like the captain's wheel. But I would have called them like the captains or the pirates or something, as opposed to I didn't know you called the person that drives a riverboat also a pilot. That's cool.
Yep, they're pilots. Yeah, and then that it's a fairly newer version of that logo. So there's an anchor inside of the wheel, as you mentioned, and we have different versions that go back into the 1930s of all the different types of wheels, but that's been a common nautical theme throughout our history.
I like it. So while we're doing a little history lesson here, let's go over some of the highlights of Portland basketball.
Yeah, I mean, there's, it's not as robust as some others. So it's Gonzaga's obviously recent history of BYU's history. Yeah. But for University of Portland and the WCC, the West Coast Conference in particular, historically has some really good history. I mean, everybody's familiar with Gonzaga, but prior to that, Santa Clara, San Francisco had, number one ranked teams in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Probably our University of Portland best teams were late 70s, early 80s. Jack Avina was the head coach. There were some NBA players. Darwin Cook, who had an extensive NBA career, was the point guard. Rick Ravio, who's our number 2 all-time leading scorer, leading rebounder, and was drafted by the Lakers and had an extended pro career. His son actually played for us, Nick Ravio, and his other son played at Gonzaga, Derek Ravio. They were the two big big guys during that era, as well as Jose Slaughter, who's our all-time leading scorer. So late 70s, early 80s, those teams were really good. So San Francisco at the time was one of the top teams in the country, so we had some good battles with them. Those teams won 18 games, but in that era, you had to win your conference to essentially go to the NCAA.
Yeah,
and,
we've been talking a lot about.
Never made the NCAA tournament, so that's tough. It was a golden era, and you talk to our fans from that era. Up in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon State was a powerhouse at that time. Ralph Miller was their head coach, and there were a few times when they were ranked in the top 10, and University of Portland hosted them at Memorial Coliseum, where the Blazers used to play, and knocked off Oregon State. So those were some of the bigger moments when you talk to our older fans that were saying, those teams, if they were playing in this era, they'd be a top 25 team. And so that was kind of the golden era. And then the most recent modern era, 1996, we went to the NCAA tournament with a team, lost to Kerry Kittles and Tim Thomas and Villanova as a 14 seed. So that's the last time we went to the tournament from a team perspective. And that was right before Gonzaga went off. Gonzaga went the previous year, we went that year, and then a couple years later, that's when Gonzaga really took off from a basketball standpoint.
And they've been off ever since. Yeah,
they've sustained. They've done what nobody else in the WCC has been able to do. Is everybody's had their blips, but they've sustained it for a long period of time.
That they have. We've been kind of covering. We took the Christmas off here for the show, so we've been covering a lot of get to know the WCC today. And so you guys weren't quite a founding member, right? But you were right there very early in the beginning, before BYU, before Gonzaga, right?
Yeah. Very, very, very early on, 76, 77 is when we came, and there was, it was the WCAC, the West Coast Athletic Conference at the time, transitioned to the WCC. And, as you probably know now, BYU coming on a little bit later, but besides the Ivy League, the WCC's founding members have been around for, I think, as long as anybody else in the nation. Those 8 teams, the 8 primary teams, then obviously Pacific, which was a charter member and came back into the league, and then BYU joining has bumped it to 10. But those 8 private, for the most part, Catholic schools from Southern California up through Gonzaga and Portland and the Pacific Northwest, the stability of the conference is something that has stood the test of time with all these changing landscapes.
We're proud to be a part of it. I love it. Other than basketball, you got WCC athletics all over the place on campus. What are some of the other sports that the students take pride in there in Portland, outside basketball?
Yeah, definitely. I think, 2 sports in particular. First, soccer, we've won 2 NCAA women's soccer national championships in 2002 and 2005, and have historically been, one of the elite soccer schools in the country for both men and women. Clive Charles was both the men's and women's head coach for our programs up until through the 2002 season, late 80s through 2002. And, he took us to 8 Final Fours between the 2 programs, mainly on the women's side. Never could win the championship. And then he developed prostate cancer in the 2002 soccer season. He was actually the men's Olympic coach at the Sydney Olympics, came back, and everyone kind of knew it was going to be his last year. And our women's team had Christine Sinclair, who's now with the Portland Thorns and going to be the all-time leading scorer, was the primary player on that 2002 team. Wow. We actually played Santa Clara in the championship match, got down a goal, tied it, went to overtime, and Sinclair scored the game winner in overtime. And it was the last match that Clive Charles ever coached. He passed away that spring, but he finally won a national championship.
And so you mentioned one name there. As I was scrolling through everyone that's graduated, coming out of the athletics program in Portland, there's one more in that women's soccer program that I think USA fans will know.
Yeah, and she teamed up with Christine Sinclair. We're talking Megan Rapinoe, who has won just about every major national award, from Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year, gold medal, Ballon d'Or, and everything this year. So she was a freshman in 2005 when Christine Sinclair was a senior, and that's when we went undefeated and won our second national championship. There was about 4 or 5 national team players on that roster between Canada and USA. So that's a point of pride, and both those players, our soccer culture is very strong. The alumni come back regularly and are very impactful with the program. So, Megan Rapinoe, she has kind of blown up on the world stage, and she's always been a character as someone who works in media relations. It was ironic. Christine Sinclair used to run from me, and Megan Rapinoe was always there for an interview. So 2 very different personalities, but both great representatives of the university.
Gosh, and that's so fun working with student athletes, right? Just seeing how they each take to being campus stars, right? What have been some of your favorite stories of working with the athletes over the years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, you kind of go back to, you mentioned what sports, and I'll tie it into this. And probably one of my favorite coaches to work with is Rob Connor with our men's cross country program, which is an elite program. And as BYU is also elite and has done wonderful things in the cross country realm.
We're
Rob
getting
Connor's
there, but I was
probably
looking a little bit before we were there. It was just every single year, Portland.
Portland was dominant. That, BYU's been good because it's elevated our program, too, from being a regular top 15 team in the nation to when BYU came in, all of a sudden we were on the podium and finishing second and third and fourth. So that competition's been healthy and really good to help push our program to that next level. But Rob Connor's been around 30 years as our head coach. He's an alum. He used to drive the team bus for travel to the airport for all the different teams. And, he's just a really quirky personality. He loves old school wrestling. He's an eBay guy. He loves, Slayer, and he goes to concerts.
Right on.
And it's always funny talking with our student athletes that come through our cross country program and some elite ones. And when they leave, they're like, it's just, he's such a different personality and he's so authentic. You can't help but love him. He's the only coach who, when, he picks me up from the airport and he's just blasting Slayer as we're going, and I've never met him before. And it's just he is so authentic. It's hard not to like him. So there's a lot of stuff like that. When you talk about student athletes that I really enjoy, besides when we talked about Hu Jeter is our number 2 all-time scorer. And he's just a great individual. He's still playing in China, making a lot of money, but he's just one of those guys that just lit up the campus. He's about 5'9", big smile on his face, came from inner city LA, came up to Portland, which was a big culture change for him. And he's just one of those guys that everybody on campus knew him, loved him. Every time he comes back, even to this day, the food service people, he remembers them. He goes up, he takes their hand, he shakes their hand, says hello to them. So he was kind of a campus icon and continues to be a beloved figure among our fan population for basketball.
And I love that that feels like the small school interaction that I think BYU fans aren't as familiar with. Before I came here, I actually went to a school my freshman year back in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, called Gannon University. It's a small Catholic school as well, and it had about 4,000, right around where Portland's sitting at. And just there's something different, right, about a smaller gym or the way everyone interacts on campus. Can you kind of put that into words to kind of explain to someone maybe that went to BYU for 4 years and didn't get it?
Yeah, I think it's very different. I mean, I'm actually an undergraduate. I graduated from University of Portland in 2003, and you look in our department, it's very unique because we have 4 former alums that are head coaches on our staff. I think we have about 6 others that are assistant coaches on our staff. Among our administrative staff, there's a number of us that are alums, and then a number of us that went and got master's degree while working there. And the ironic thing is, the athletics business is so cyclical, and people jump from job to job.
Yeah.
And I would put the longevity of our community probably at the top end of anyone in the country. We don't have a lot of turnover, both with our coaching staffs as well as our administration, because one, Portland's a great place to live. And then as you talked about, the community of the university, it's just a tight-knit family. And you feel that, from our former coaches in different sports supporting each other. Our previous basketball coach, Eric Reveneau, used to ask me for, when we'd be riding on the bus, getting cross-country live updates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The coaches are friends with each other. It's not like that thing. And talking to some other coaches that have gone, and I won't out anybody necessarily, but other coaches that have gone on to bigger BCS-level schools and just saying, it's just so different here. I'm just used to working with everybody and everyone being on the same team, whereas maybe if I'm with this basketball program or this soccer program, it's your program and you're kind of isolated from everything else. And you just can't be successful at a place like the University of Portland with that mentality. Everyone has to support each other. Everyone has to be part of that family. All of our head coaches, with the exception of our tennis program, are all located in the Child Center, our basketball facility, and all of our main administrative staff. So we're all in the same building, which is also unique compared to maybe some bigger football schools or what they're used to. So the family environment and culture fit when we make coaching hires, and I know BYU, it's very similar in that. It's got to be, the profile has to fit for it to work, and it's similar on a different level for us. Fit is so important. That's why Clive Charles was so successful as a soccer coach. He got that. He was best friends with other coaches and everything. That's why Rob Connor has been here 30 years, has been able to beat Stanford and Oregon consistently without a track on our campus and without ever being able to beat them for a recruit. It's just kind of that chip on your shoulder mentality and make more with less and support each other and value our community that kind of pushes us to be good in a lot of different areas.
You mentioned being in the Childs Center. I know we're playing in the Marriott Center tonight, right? But take us in. What's the student section like? What are maybe some of the weird traditions that are around Portland the basketball? Like, what's maybe a song you played before you start, or what's just a tradition that you guys do there?
Yeah, I mean, with basketball, as you mentioned, our small student body, we have more traditions in our soccer program. It's funny, people refer to us as a soccer school because we have a village drum squad, we have drums, so it's a really unique environment at our soccer games. We're trying to build that at basketball. We've done different things, and it's just got to be organic, and we just haven't found that. And in recent years, the team hasn't performed at the level that we wanted to. That being said, not to bring up bad memories for BYU fans, but some of the most enjoyable games are, a triple overtime game about 6 or 7 years ago against BYU. I don't know if you remember that or were around.
Yeah, a little bit.
Probably one of the most entertaining games I've ever been a part of. And, Bobby Sharp for Portland hit a bunch of crazy shots at the end of the game. Ended up being triple overtime and a lot of fun. And, crowd stormed the court, which is, showing a lot of respect to BYU in a lot of ways on how important that win was.
Yeah, we'll
but
take
those
it.
are like the memories that are fun, beating Gonzaga that same year as well. You point to those, to the point we made earlier about Gonzaga being able to sustain it. It seems like every time Portland basketball has gotten on the cusp of doing something special and gotten the community engaged, it just hasn't sustained. I think back to 2009, we played in the Anaheim Classic, and we had a really good team at that time. Nick Ribio and Luke Sikma, who's been, one of the top players in Europe for a number of years, had a really good team, and we beat UCLA by 25 in the first round, which was their worst non-conference loss ever. And then we beat Tubby Smith in Minnesota, who was ranked 18th in the country, and then took West Virginia, who went to the championship game that year, down to the wire at the championship game. We come out of that. We get ranked for the first time in 50 years. And we came home, and we have a packed house, and we're playing Portland State, our crosstown rival, and Portland State just played out of their mind and beat us. And it was just deflated. And it's just that's kind of, you hate to say it, but as a UP alum, it was just like that encompassed kind of the last couple decades for UP basketball. It's like there's all this hope and glimmer, and everyone gets excited, and then the air just kind of gets let out of the balloon. So, the challenge for us, just like everybody, and it's harder now with Gonzaga and BYU and St. Mary's establishing themselves, is, how can we develop some consistency and get our fans to consistently buy in, get on board, and have some fun. So that's been a challenge, but I would say if you have a chance to get to the Childs Center, it's one of the best viewing. It's a great facility to watch a good basketball game. You're right on top of the court. Yep. There's not a bad seat in the house, and it can get really fun when you get 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people in the building.
Yeah, I was taking a look at your schedule, right? So BYU there's a new WCC schedule, right? So you don't play every single WCC team twice, but we got each other twice. And when BYU comes up there, I looked on it, and it was going to be mascot night. Since I'm not going to get to talk to you again before then, why don't you give some of the BYU fans an idea of what that's going to be?
Well, it's a lot of fun. I mean, we cater a lot of our promotions to be family-friendly and kids. We do a lot of, youth group experience packages, from getting introduced with the team to sitting on the bench during warm-ups to, take over the court after the game and shoot around with our guys. So we try to be really family-friendly, and obviously what do kids love? They love mascots.
That
and
they
there's a ton of mascots in the Pacific Northwest area. So we get all the local minor league teams, from the hockey to baseball to soccer, to as well as some corporate sponsors bring in their mascots. And it's just kind of a zoo. You got a bunch of mascots running around all over the concourse, and they'll do a little halftime awkward game and do some contests at timeouts and stuff, and a lot of photo opportunities. So it's a lot of fun. It really fits into what we talked about earlier and kind of creating that tight-knit culture and family environment.
Yep, yeah. And what's the Portland? I assume that the Riverboat Pilot will be there as well. What's he look like?
So Wally Pilot, he's a human-like foam mascot. He's got his sailor's cap on and wears a pilot jersey and runs around. So there's been a few different iterations of that mascot, but he will be there as well to, well, some would say scare the kids, but others would say entertain them.
There you go. Hey, in the WCC, and you mentioned Portland State earlier, do you guys have a rival that's maybe a little bit more than just all? Because it seems like in our conference, every game is huge. But is there one team that you guys kind of have as a rival?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on sports. Basketball specifically, and it's hard because it's just gotten blown out of the water. But, forever it was Gonzaga, and for a good majority of the history, Portland was the better team in that. And Gonzaga wasn't this elite force, and just because of regionalities, being the two Pacific Northwest teams, having very similar institutions, competitive across the board and everything.
Right.
Portland Gonzaga was that rivalry. Now, obviously, it's hard to call them a true rival or for their fans to determine a rival when, they've kind of steamrolled the last couple decades. But historically, that has been the case. And you mentioned Oregon State being good. Portland State is the in-city, the other Division I team in the city. So there's a pretty good rivalry going on with there. And then depending on the sport, like I say, if you talk to our cross-country coach, he says BYU's our rival right now.
Cool.
You talk to our soccer coach, Santa Clara has been historically, along with Portland, dominant team that's won a national championship, and now BYU's good as well. So it's interesting from a BYU perspective. I think them coming into the conference has been really good for a lot of our Olympic sports. In having another high-level team to compete with some of those teams that maybe haven't been there before. And I think for BYU's perspective, if they go back and look at the last decade, I think they'd probably be a little surprised at the level of competition across all sports they're getting in the WCC. So it's been a good partnership.
Oh yeah, no surprise to me. I've been keeping track of it, and I try to remind BYU fans all the time. Even when football or basketball have these down years, Olympic sport competition in the WCC is awesome and is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, a lot of good teams, and like I say, every school kind of has their points of pride. We're soccer, men's and women's, and cross country, but you look at Pepperdine with their tennis, golf, baseball. It's an elite conference. Maybe not across the board in every sport for every team, but the best at each specific sport can compete with anyone in the nation.
All right, Jason, my last question as always, and you can be biased, you can be a homer as much as you want, but what are you hoping to see or what do you expect to see tonight in the basketball game, Portland v. BYU?
Yeah, I'm hoping for a competitive game. Portland, even when we've struggled the last few years, has seemed to play pretty well at BYU for whatever reason, so I'd like to see that continue in our team. We finally got off the snide and snapped a long WCC losing streak, handled San Francisco without our best player by 11 last Saturday. That was the last time out, and we're leading Gonzaga early in the second half, so we've got a little bit of momentum, and I think it's going to be a good, entertaining game. I think, for the basketball diehards in the BYU community that have seen Portland as kind of being struggling in the last few years, you're going to see a team that's going to be a little more enjoyable, a little more offensively dangerous, and a little grinded on defense. I'd be surprised if it was a blowout, but if our Pilots were able to come in and have it as a one-possession game late, I think we'd be happy with that.
I'm not sure if my heart can take another one of those. Just on Thursday, we were in overtime all over the place, and but yeah, entertaining.
St. was coming off of 4 overtimes and then has to go to
another one. Yeah, gosh, it's been the WCC play is early on, but it has already proven to be fun as always. Jason Brough, thank you so much for educating us a little bit about the Portland Pilots, sharing a little bit about your school. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Jason Brough is a Senior Associate Athletic Director for the University of Portland's Athletics Department. When we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper into the WCC and the schedule awaiting the Cougars for the remainder of the regular season. This is the Cougar Tailgate. Welcome back into the Cougar Tailgate. WCC play has begun for the BYU Cougars. They are 1-1, including one just heartbreaking overtime loss, and hopefully 2-1 by the end of today. We just got done talking a little Portland basketball, so we know what we're up against a little bit better with Jason Brough, and thank you very much for coming on the show. He was amazing. He's as a fast talker myself, someone that thinks and then just spits out everything they can. I really appreciated talking to Jason for a little bit. It was fun to kind of hear what I must sound like to people sometimes.
As a Gilmore Girls fan, I appreciate fast talking, so that's a little Gilmore Girls talk for you.
Yeah. So WCC play. Yeah. We're into it.
Moving right along, he says. Moving right along.
To be derailed by now, if we want to talk about The Bachelor coming back this week, we can head into that little crevice of entertainment for a second.
So for Bachelor Talk, head over to Cole's Side Corner podcast, The Bachelor Talk.
And Sydney's apparently not joining me there. Anyway, basketball is happening. It's WCC play. And before this, And this is our first show since WCC play has started, so we kind of need to introduce the folks. You know, if you're just a casual BYU fan, what can you expect to see over the next couple months of basketball? Because this is conference play. These are the only teams we're going to play. We're going to have a couple of them twice. It was just a couple years ago that they kind of switched up the way WCC was doing their scheduling. It used to be that we played every single team twice, right? You got a home and away. It's not that way anymore.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how they decide who does what. I always get a little nervous when the schedule comes out because I want 2 games with the Gonzagas and the St. Mary's every year.
Nope, I don't.
I mean, mostly because unfortunately it feels like there's always going to be at least one loss in each of those series.
One loss
so I don't want it. Yeah, I don't want to just. I want a couple shots at them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I don't mind if we only play a Pacific one. Sorry, Pacific. But I get more excited and I get more hyped for those Gonzaga St. Mary's games.
Yeah, and we do, for the record, have Gonzaga twice and St. Mary's twice this year.
So far, every year since they've switched up the schedule, we've got them twice every time.
If I was the one making a schedule, I would kind of look at the rankings from last year and just have the whole top half make sure that they play each other twice, have the whole bottom half make sure that they play each other twice, you know, do whatever you want with the middle. But the WCC didn't ask me, and so they'll do whatever they do. But we do want to kind of get to know, you know, each and every week we are going to speak to someone, as we have been doing on the Cougar Tailgate, to give an in-depth look at what this team is. But let's paint a broad picture here and see what the WCC conference holds for the next few months. We now know a lot about Portland and what a pilot really is and what it means. It's not a little airplane dinghy guy. It's actually a little riverboat pirate with.
Yeah, their logo is like an anchor and a full on. I don't know nautical tours. Yeah, it's like a steering wheel is what I would call it. But I imagine that like if you know nautical terms, it's probably got a more like specific name for it. But essentially, the wheel that steers the boat.
Yes.
Sure.
The helm, I think, is where you stand at the.
Look at you.
Wheel that steers the boat.
I grew up in a landlocked state. I
watched a lot of Star Trek, and they use nautical terms to refer to how they craft their spaceship. Anyway, the Portland Pilots are actually the smallest school by enrollment in the entire WCC.
Interesting.
There's BYU. BYU has been the extra school into this conference, and we love it, and we feel like we belong now. But they kind of had their own thing going there, right on the West Coast. Each one of these schools, and we belong here too, is a private Christian college. But everything except for BYU hovers right around or less than 10,000 kids in it.
Wow.
BYU has 34,000 on their campus. The Marriott Center itself seats twice as many
as those schools
have, like, total, right? They could get their entire student body into the Marriott Center plus a couple. Yeah,
it's definitely a different vibe where we have a venue that accommodates other things, not just basketball. You know, We've got devotionals and whatnot in the Marriott Center, so we need a lot more space. But I sometimes wonder what it's like for those teams to, you know, once or twice a year, or I guess just once for most of those teams when they come here,
walk into the Coliseum, the Marriott Center.
It's a lot of people, a lot of lights, a lot of sounds. So it's definitely different.
We have the different venue, the odd man out in that as well. So let's kind of go down the list. Let's introduce you to and see what you know about, briefly, each one of these teams. Portland, the Pilots. They wear, oh gosh, this is going to be impossible for me. Let's not do colors, because the list I'm looking at only
Portland's
shows
purple.
A swash of the color. It doesn't tell me in words what the color is, so I'm just not going to guess, and we're
colorblind. Oh no.
But they are the Pilots, and they have 3,200 kids at their school, the University of Portland.
3,200?
Yes, 3,000.
Wow.
Roughly the size of, like, my freshman econ class is what it felt like. Next, let's go back. Let's talk about Loyola Marymount, because we played them. Located in sunny Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, a short, 5-minute drive from my house in LA when I lived there. They are the Lions, correct?
They are. The other team in LA is the Pepperdine Waves.
The Waves. Pepperdine, listen, if you want to go to a school to be on the beach, don't go to LMU. The beaches by LMU are trash, especially when you compare them to the beaches at Pepperdine. I have never seen a more beautiful campus than Pepperdine. They are right in the heart of Malibu, and the campus itself is kind of situated up on a hill, so you're just looking out at the ocean, and it is stunning. And I had some friends out in LA who were graduates of Pepperdine, which apparently is a feat because people who go to Pepperdine spend a lot of money and never go to class. Well, according to my friends, nobody ever goes to class.
Things to do in LA
because they're always on the beach doing yoga or surfing, and but I mean, you definitely pay for that view when you go to Pepperdine. It is, if you ever get a chance if you're out there for a family vacation and there happens to be a BYU game, check out the Pepperdine
If for
campus.
some reason you want to leave the 28 degrees and sleep in the snow of beautiful Provo and go to... Yeah, I would go there in a heartbeat. But so those are the two in the South. So let's kind of geographically look at this as well, right? As I said, the WCC started off as kind of a coalition of California schools. So there's... and there's a bunch kind of clumped up in Northern California, right? Portland, Spokane, Washington, home of the Gonzaga Bulldogs, we were very, very familiar with. And then there's BYU hanging out in Utah. And then it's just this kind of California run. Those are the two LA schools. And then you go kind of north in the state. You got the University of Pacific in Stockton, California. They are the Pacific...
Tigers.
Yep, as opposed to the LMU Lions. A couple cats in the California WCC schools.
And here in
again, kind of a mid 6,000-ish folks going there. Pacific was the team that they were a founding member of the WCC. They left the conference for a little while and have recently come back. So technically BYU not the most recent addition to the WCC. Pacific is, but also they were sort of there before. They belong there.
Yeah, they were a weird addition too because the first few years that they were in there, they had some sanctions and they weren't allowed to compete in the WCC tournament. So it felt like it was a few years before we really had Pacific. Now they're an official part of the team.
Moraga, California, also up there. St. Mary's, the St. Mary's Gales that we just recently played. 4,700 student body enrollment. And that is right around what the average is. Really, San Francisco is another, right around that Bay Area school. They're the second biggest school as far as enrollment to BYU at almost exactly 10,000 students. And again, a reminder, BYU has 34,000.
That is wild. When I think of, this is a wild tangent, but when I think of San Francisco, I think a few years ago they had a player and his name was D-End Parker, like D''End. Mm-hmm. And the running story that they would tell on every broadcast is that he was the last kid in his family. So his parents literally named him D-End. Like, this is the end of it. This is the last one. Every time I see the San Francisco logo or we're playing San Francisco, I think of good old D-End Parker.
D-End. Across the bay there, also right up in the neighborhood, there's Santa Clara, kind of down the bay. The reason I know where Santa Clara is now is because that's where the San Francisco 49ers stuck their stadium. By the way, talking about Northern California, the Raiders had to leave anyway, right? The Raiders are on the east side. San Francisco's on the west side of the bay. And then Santa Clara is like down it.
Oh, it is not.
Why didn't the Raiders and 49ers just share that stadium? If the two New York teams can share, and now the two LA teams are going to share that brand new beautiful stadium down in the bottom of the state.
Inglewood. I don't know how to answer that question for you.
Instead, they're building the Death Star out there
in Vegas.
All black.
I will say I am excited to see what they do in Vegas, only because I'm not even a hockey fan, but seeing what they've been able to do with the Golden Knights in Vegas has been like really impressive.
They fill up the T-Mobile Arena. Like it's a
it's
hockey
an event.
Town now.
Every game is an event.
Desert. I feel like it's maybe just hot outsid and people want to go where there's air conditioning and you have to keep the ice.
You have ice inside?
Yeah.
I'd love to be there. Where? Tell me when. Yeah, no, because where we are in Utah, you would think we hosted the Olympics. We should be more into ice hockey, but we're not. So to be able to take a hockey team and put them in the middle of Las Vegas and have it be as successful as it's been, and I think they're such a show business town. Everything they do is a show, and so they've been able to kind of implement that in their hockey games. And so I am excited to see the Raiders in Vegas for that reason, but weird that they are completely moving out of the state.
Every halftime might be an event.
That would be
Las Vegas.
I mean, yeah, you've got resident artists all over town that you could
do
just
Cirque du Soleil at a Raiders game. The stadium's
amazing.
Big enough.
That'd be so great.
And then the last team that we haven't talked about, coming all the way back down to the bottom of the state again, is the University of San Diego, not to be confused with San Diego State, who we also have played in basketball this year.
I've actually also been to USD. It's not as impressive a campus as Pepperdine, but you are pretty close to like La Jolla and the San Diego beaches, which are much better than LA's beaches. Bless. Go to Malibu or go to La Jolla or Laguna if you want to stay kind of closer to LA, but anyway.
Beach insider information.
Beach insider information.
On the
Newport. If you must be really close to LA, go to Manhattan Beach, but don't go to Venice or Santa Monica.
I feel like that's the one I did go to. I've only been to LA like a couple times with a buddy, and he just took us to where the touristy things are.
Well, that's where you're going to find all
it was cold too. I just was not pleasant on that beach.
No.
San Diego was cold too. No, I've been to San Diego too because it was windy that day. It was in like
it
probably
can get
February
cold.
Or something
People
like
don't
that.
believe it, but
Yeah.
I would call my parents and complain about it being 50 degrees, and they'd be like, "Oh, is it 50 degrees?" I'm like, "No, but it's humid here, and that makes it cold, and I'm very cold." And then they'll come out and visit, and we'll go to Disneyland.
And I'm trying to
like,
go to a beach. Like,
yes.
50 degrees isn't cold whenever you're just getting in your car and going to your job. But, like, if you want to enjoy the beach.
Right. And
50
it
ain't
looks
ideal.
beautiful, and you want to be outside, but it's not quite there.
BYU joined the WCC the year after Jimmer, 2011, right?
Yep.
Because we were in the Mountain West. That's very memorable with San Diego State. Since then, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now we're in our 9th year of WCC play. How many years would you say the WCC has sent 3 teams to the NCAA tournament?
Well, we kind of cheated because you told me the answer earlier, but my guess was 2 times.
Thanks for playing along.
Yeah.
You would be wrong if you guessed 2 or more than 1. The very first year, our first year post-Jimmer, BYU was that 3rd team that went along with Gonzaga and St. Mary's to the NCAA tournament. Since then, it has been the Zags along with either BYU or St. Mary's or just, no one. In 2017, it was just Gonzaga that came out of the WCC. But other than that, it's either Gonzaga St. Mary's, Gonzaga St. Mary's, Gonzaga BYU, Gonzaga BYU, Gonzaga St. Mary's. Like,
Yep.
there's kind of a clear top tier of the WCC, or at least has been since BYU has joined. And that's kind of what I got into with Jason Brough a little bit, talking about how maybe this year there's going to be a little bit more parity. And because of the strength of the middle chunk of the WCC, I think it helps bolster BYU and St. Mary's resumes in trying to be those 2nd and 3rd teams from this conference and do that again. Be a 3-bid conference again to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. And obviously resume means so much more in basketball than it does in football. And I think BYU's done some good things and has some good resume games. Like the Houston win on the road is a big one. Being able to compete in state and on the, not just on the road, but neutral sites, I think is, it's a small thing, but it's a good look on your resume. But it's going to be, it's always like that fine balance of, it's great to be in that top 3, and where the years when it was so strongly Gonzaga, St. Mary's, BYU at the top, and everybody else just below, that's kind of nice because you're always going to be in the mix, but you then risk being that 3rd person left out in the cold, which BYU has been. So with a little more parity, and if you're playing teams that are viewed as being better, then maybe that boosts your resume more naturally, and you get a at-large.
Mm-hmm. And the at-large is kind of what you got to rely on because Gonzaga just so happens to be the number one team in the whole dang country. And so to win your WCC tournament and automatically get to go to the NCAA tournament is impossible.
I mean, could they just take one for the team? You're gonna go. You're already going, Gonzaga.
You could be
just could you just take one for the team? Do you have to have everything all the time?
I think it would be fun to see what would happen if all the not Gonzaga teams played in a tournament to see who would go to the NCAA tournament.
It's very true.
It'd be fun. Heck, even again, every single team has had their day, right? Any team could beat another team. But not everyone can beat Gonzaga.
If I've learned anything from being the older sister of a Patriots fan, it's that people never get tired of winning. So, unfortunately.
Because I've gotten tired of the Patriots winning because I'm not a Patriots fan. When we come back, we're going to keep talking football, but unfortunately not as bright of a note when it comes to the end of the BYU season. That's coming up next here on the Cougar Tailgate. Welcome back into the Cougar Tailgate. I'm Cole Wissinger along with Sydney Carlson. We're talking WCC basketball. We're excited for the basketball season, and I'm even more excited for basketball because it means we get to just totally forget how that whole football season ended up.
Yeah, we're turning the page. We are moving on. I will say, so our whole staff just moved our offices. We are now working out of the stadium as of today, and
wow. Congratulations!
Thank you.
Happy move-in.
Thank you. It was. There's pictures of players up on the walls, and I will say, makes it a little hard to just leave football in the past. I mean,
you're reminded
listen to me complain about having a really great view, but yeah.
Yeah, last game of the season against San Diego State, we kind of brushed by that, but then while we were on hiatus for the holidays, Christmas Eve, BYU played Hawaii in the Hawaii Bowl and was just very comfortably in the lead for the whole game until they weren't. And then you ended the season 7-6. And when you looked at the schedule at the first, when it started off, and honestly, our first episode of Cougar Tailgate, we played this little package of a bunch of fans saying, hey, what do you want to get out of this season? And, I mean, realistic expectations was about 7-6, sure. But we got wins against Boise and Utah State and stinking Tennessee and USC, and yet you fall to Hawaii and to Toledo and to USF.
This is one of the weirder seasons for me as a fan because had you told me, before the season started, hey, we're going to beat Tennessee on the road, I would have been overjoyed. And I also would have said that you're crazy. We're not going to beat Tennessee in SEC country. That's insane.
And also, Tennessee not as weak as we thought they were when we had just beaten them, right? Tennessee went to a bowl game, stunning victory in their bowl. We played a ton of these bowl eligible and confident teams.
Oh, absolutely. But when you drop games that you absolutely feel like you should have won, not just because of the opponent, but we had a couple games that we were firmly in control the entire time and then just let it go the last, 5-6 minutes of the game. And those losses hurt enough that it almost casts this shadow over the whole season and makes you forget about those amazing moments. That overtime win in Tennessee felt so good. That overtime win against USC.
Follow it up the very next week with an overtime.
Everybody was just high on life. It was so great. And so it's unfortunate that the whole season feels a little tainted because it could have been a much more memorable and magical season with those amazing wins and then the wins that you're supposed to get, just to that's kind of your foundation, Yeah. But because we're all just kind of sitting here with this meh taste in our mouths, we almost forget about how great we felt after those other games, which was such a bummer.
Yeah, to end beating Boise State being their only regular season loss of the whole year, there are some real highlights to look at for the season, and yet the lows were really weird. And again, it's not like we're disappointed you lose to USF and Toledo because they're USF and Toledo. It's because in that game you were confidently ahead, and then it just all sort of falls apart, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, what a terrible cosmic joke to have that Hawaii game be Christmas Eve my family has a tradition every year that on Christmas Eve we watch Muppet's Christmas Carol.
Aw.
And
because after all, there's only one more sleep till Christmas.
Exactly. But of course, first and foremost, our tradition is that we are BYU fans through and through. And so we are watching that bowl game no matter what. And it was also the longest game. It was a solid 4 hours. And so we were postponing our movie for this game thinking, you know what, we're going to get a great win. We're going to feel that Christmas spirit. We're going to go right in. And then that game ended and it was like, well, is Christmas canceled? Like, what do we do now? You know, like, it's just, we just felt so down. And luckily the movie was able to bring us up a little bit. But like, it just seemed like you said, like a microcosm of like, of course, like on a day that is of joy that we are brought down, because it just felt like that's kind of how a lot of the season went, where we were feeling so great and then we're just brought down to earth. So
Falls apart.
Yeah.
Do you watch the Muppet Christmas Carol with or without When the Love Is Gone?
Cole, I am so glad you asked me this question because I make my family stop the movie and go and watch that cut song because it doesn't have nearly as much poignant like feeling without it. Mm-hmm. And there's a reprise at the end that doesn't make any sense if you haven't seen the song When Love Is Gone. And I could talk about this for an hour. I have very strong feelings about it. I'm so glad that you asked me that question, but absolutely is the answer.
I didn't realize that it was a controversial thing to ask people because I grew up watching this movie on Christmas Eve every single year, but we watched it on a VHS tape that had it in there, and so we didn't have to pause. Watched it on Disney Plus this year because I'm away from my parents and they have the VCR and the tape and everything back home, and I did not. And it just, like, he starts into it, and then it just kind of skips over to Gonzo and Rizzo crying. And why are they crying?
Though, thank you. Why are exactly? I'm going to play this tape back for my family. I'm so glad that we're talking about this. No, but I feel very strongly about it. Yeah, we got the DVD maybe six years ago, and I just remember being like, wait, did I hallucinate that there was a song here? I remember there being a song.
Right. See, this is how we spent again, Christmas Eve, BYU, whatever. It was about more than that. It's about watching Muppets and Michael Caine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learning the spirit of Christmas.
Michael Caine being putting on a show, an actor's master's class with all of those Muppets. What a gem. Entertainment.
More than just the basketball game and more than just what goes on. We try to bring it all to you and bring the real fan experience on the radio every single week. That's Sydney Carlson. I'm Cole Wissinger, and we're here every Saturday at noon Eastern. Nope. It is 2 Eastern, noon Mountain, 11 Pacific, because I can do a little bit of math on the fly. And anytime on a podcast, don't need to know what time zone you're in to just go on to BYUradio.org and click on the Cougar Tailgate and download whatever episode if you want to catch up on some of the teams we played earlier in the basketball season, or remember all the hope there was at the beginning of the football season. All of our episodes are available there or on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, all the major podcast platforms. If you want to get in contact with the show, you can send us an email. It's cougartailgate@gmail.com. You can tell us your fan experience and what makes being a BYU fan important to you. This has been a production of BYU Radio. Go Cougs!